Our neighbor's shed encroaches on our property, preventing us from building our house, but everyone seems to be afraid of our neighbor and doesn't want to help us. My dad owns a vacant but desirable property in NY. He is passing the property along to me so I can build a house to live there. The property has been in my family since 1937. It took about $10,000 for him to get the title cleaned up with a lawyer. Last spring I had a survey done that showed the neighbor's shed encroaches on the property by about 7, setback is 12, so needs to move around 19 back. The neighbor even said to my surveyor that my dad should just sell him the land. With this encroachment, my dad is unable to pass along a clean title to me, and without a clean title, I'm not able to secure a home building loan. I was going to work with the neighbor to amicably remove the shed, but he swiftly blocked my number and didn't answer his door when I was in town last August. I looked into the town codes and the penalty for the violation is $100 a week. He also does not have a permit for this shed, which is necessary per the town code of any structure over 120 square feet requiring a permit. Since I didn't live there, I got the city involved. The building inspector told him to remove the shed from our property. The neighbor ignored and refused for about 5 months. Then the building inspector had the city attorney write him a letter in January giving him 60 days to respond. The inspector has not given us a copy of the letter. We've requested it multiple times now, so I'm unsure of what all was said in the letter. I've also requested that the inspector enforce the penalties as well as an injunction to padlock his shed for further use. Those requests were ignored as well. We didn't hear back for about 90 days from the neighbor after the attorney's letter, but he agreed to move the shed. Woohoo, right? He then said we need to get surveyors to pin where he should move his shed so he doesn't have to do it twice. We have 3 different surveys of the property, and there are pins at each corner. I called our surveyor and it would be $700 to mark where he should move the shed. I felt that I shouldn't be responsible for getting his shed into compliance. This is his violation and I've been patiently waiting and delaying an entire year. I don't care if he isn't within the full means of the 12 setback, he just needs it off my property to appease me at this point. Initially, I was willing to get the surveyor out again and pay for it, but my concern is that if we do that he's still not going to move it promptly and keep moving the goalpost for us. The neighbor even said it would take 5 months after we pin the property. I don't know why he thinks it will take 5 months to move the shed. I called around and got a quote from Shed Movers, and one said they could do it next week for $575. I've got a lawyer in my back pocket who will be my last-ditch effort. It's expensive. A letter alone will be $1,500, and will take a long time, so I don't love that idea. He said we could do a revocable license for the bit of land, but I'm not giving the neighbor anything at this point. I want to put a driveway and a fence there now too, so I'll need that land. At this point I understand why my neighbor is being a jerk. He wants to get away with whatever he can, but I can't understand why the building inspector is letting him get away with everything. Why no penalties? Why no injunctions? He was very unhappy when I called the town clerk and asked for more information because the inspector didn't answer mine. He's been so ineffective on this and it's having real repercussions for us. We're renting in the call area that we don't like and would love to have made progress this year to move ASAP. The neighbor should have racked up at least $4,400 in penalties so far, and an additional $2,000 for the 5 months he wants to tack on. I feel like that would invoke actual pressure for him to move it, right? So what is my next step here to get this done ASAP? Update. So I escalated this with the town and bothered them to no end. I got up to the town supervisor and he was very frustrated on my behalf. I told him I've been dealing with this situation for a year, that the neighbor has been told to move the shed by the inspector and town attorney, that I've already had 3 surveys of the land to prove the encroachment, and that the property is properly demarcated with pins. He asked why the building inspector was having yet another surveyor go out there and said he would just have someone measure where the shed needs to be moved using the survey. He says he will personally get involved in this and will give neighbor 1 week to get his shed moved. I get a call back with him later that day with the junior building inspector, taking direction from the senior inspector while he's out of town, on the line, and womp womp. He changes his tune. He said I have to get a surveyor to go out there to pin the property line again, but specifically next to the shed. They could never answer me why it was my responsibility to pin a specific spot on my property for a shed that shouldn't exist there in the first place, solely for the benefit of the neighbor figuring out how far back to move his shed to get it into compliance. I'm fuming now, and I also figured out that the senior inspector forgot that I had sent him the 3rd survey showing the encroachment in the spring, which should have began the penalty violations. He also didn't provide that to the neighbor who needed it and had been asking for it. He just thought I didn't provide the survey. Even the junior inspector was embarrassed and frustrated by his lack of help and thoroughness with my case. At this point I'm still adamant that I don't want to get another surveyor out there. It will just take too long. I talked to a lawyer who would be less expensive than a surveyor and pretty much said this was a slam dunk win that would enforce the removal ASAP. We're still trying to tread lightly though, so we don't piss off my future home's building inspector too much with the threats of using an attorney. But we desperately need results. My dad's an engineer and comes up with an idea that we present to the junior inspector. We'll use the shed as the property line pin to mark the setback for the neighbor. The shed is shown on the survey and we can see where the property line crosses through the shed, so we just need to measure and mark those places IRL. It's stupidly simple and similar to an idea I mentioned months ago about measuring the setback from the shed, but they approved it. I used the survey's CAD files to set up the measurements for where to pin the property line and 6 setback lines. When my dad and husband went out to go mark the shed using a line of sight, they met up with the neighbor and he was so unbelievably nice. Mind you, we've all been blocked, ignored, had our no trespassing signs taken down, and been told in the past that we should just sell him the property. Now he's making friends with my husband, giving him a tour of his house, talking Scotch, sharing contractor info with him, etc. I'm baffled hearing this and don't trust it but welcome it for the moment. Then my husband tells me the neighbor's wife is rude to him and pissed that we didn't get the additional survey, didn't like that we were doing it this way, etc. The neighbor hushes her and she goes off to pout the rest of the day. My theory is that maybe the wife is the one doing all the blocking and snagging this up. The neighbor apparently had a heart attack earlier this year, so I wonder if she took over his communications. When this first started last year, they mentioned that they tried to buy our property so their son could live on it. Apparently, it's just her son, his stepson. I think she drove some of this conflict and he may be giving it up or just changing his tune after his heart attack. Ever since then, he's been friendly toward us, which I'm relieved about. So after the pinning of the property line and marking the 6 setback, the building inspector approved our work and then gave the neighbor another month to get this scheduled with a mover and finally moved. After about a month and a half, I didn't hear from the inspector, so we gave the town a call. It had been moved. We went forward with our final survey to confirm that our land is clear of encroachments. It's cleared, but the neighbor only moved it 3.6 off the property line, short of the 6 setback. Woof. I got a letter today from the building inspector saying he passed it and the case is officially closed. I absolutely do not care that it's only 3.6 back instead of 6. I'm just glad he's off my land and can now move forward. But seriously? I don't know how this got approved, but I'm in awe of the incompetence of the inspector. I guess I'll just have to see what all I can get away with too. Anyways, that's my shed saga.